You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you for joining me today on this Training Thursday, where we're going to be going through a little research, or I should say a nice little letter Harvard University published in January of last year, talking about the 4 most important types of exercise. So this has been floated around on the internet quite a bit. I've seen it on actually quite a few sites. I wanted to make sure that you saw it, that you knew about it, and that you understood that when we start to get too dogmatic about any one type of exercise, while excluding the others, we'll always become lopsided. We'll always become imbalanced. And you know, as I talk about the functional medicine practice that I have here in Boston and also obviously online all over the world, is that the root cause of all dis-ease in the body is really becoming imbalanced. And that's because we become deficient, and I'm going to show you how that is in exercise as well, deficient in certain nutrients, and they might be, whether it's proteins, fats, carbohydrates, it might be the micronutrients, which are the minerals, the vitamins, the amino acids, the neurotransmitters. All of these things can lead to autoimmune-based issues, immune-based suppression. It might lead to depression itself or anxiety. Could lead to fatigue and skin issues, you name it, right? But it's the deficiencies because our body doesn't have the raw material of what it needs in life to do its job. I mean, that's essentially it. Your car can't get from point A to point B without the proper fuel, right? I mean, so like that's the whole point. Your car works totally fine. It just needs the right fuel to get it from one spot to the other. And then the maintenance. I mean, that's so important as well. We can't wait for the car to break down on the side of the road for us to begin to maintain it. If we maintain it on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, doing more stuff, maybe every 3 months or 4 months or so, such as a detox or something like that, we're going to keep it that much stronger. And the last thing I'll say to that is just like bringing your car in for its annual checkup, is that you start to run labs, that you start to look at your body, whether it's from a fitness assessment standpoint, that's what we're going to talk about today, or whether it's from a wellness anti-aging perspective that I've spoken about on many previous shows, where you're looking at your hormones, you're looking at your thyroid, you're looking at your omega-3 levels, your vitamin D, all of those great things. Well, with exercise, it's no different. I mean, we can look at our body composition, right? We can look at our body fat percentage. For men, try to get it between 14 and 18%. For women, between 18 and 22%. We can look at our BMI, try to get it between 19 and 24.9. We can look at our waist-to-hip ratio. For men, about 0.9. For women, about 0.85. So, we can look at all of these different numbers and ratios and statistics. And overall, no one number is the end-all, be-all, right? But overall, we want our numbers to be on point. We want them to be in the proper ranges and not within just a tenth of a point, right? Not conventional medicine standpoint. We want to look at this from a functional medicine standpoint. Well, with exercise, remember, with exercise, we get certain groups of people. Let's call it whether it's spin or boot camp or kettlebell or Pilates or yoga or whatever it might be. Now, all the things that I just named can all be fantastic. I mean, they really can. They can all be great. The problem is this. They're each marketed in a way where if you don't do them and solely them and you're not part of that group, well, you're probably doing something wrong. It's a lot like the diet world, right? If you're not doing keto, you're doing it wrong. If you're not paleo, you're doing it wrong. If you're eating any grains at all, you're insane. If you do this, it's like all of these different camps that people have to be in. But what they don't understand is that in the short term, everything works. CrossFit works in the short term. Only doing yoga in the short term works. Only doing, jogging in the short term works. All of these things work in the short term. Same with keto. Same with ingesting some grains. I mean, because grains for a lot of people can be reactive. So in the long term, they may not work. But here's the deal. When we understand that life is about balance, and I'm not talking about moderation, I'm talking about balance, right? I'm talking about balance, what works for your body, this bioindividuality, but knowing that we all need some of it. It also goes back, and I will get to my point in 1 second, but it also goes back to the Ayurvedic doshas, right? The body types. So you can have different body types, but everyone has a little bit of the vata, a little bit of the pitta, and a little bit of the kapha. Everyone has those three body types because everyone needs balance. But our body type is certainly swayed in one or two of those doshas or genotypes in the first place. So some people, maybe it's a little bit of a larger joint. And again, I'm going to get into more of this in the future because a lot of people think when I say kapha or endomorph that the person's overweight. And so I work with a lot of people, whether it's over Skype or in office, and I say, oh, no, your dominant body type is the endomorph or the kapha, and they get all upset, and they're like, oh, that's not my body type, I'm not overweight. And I said, of course you're not overweight, you're in great shape. Doesn't mean the kapha body type's overweight. I mean, I don't know where we got into that. That's not true at all. There are just certain characteristics of the kapha body type, such as the thicker hair, the more of a rounder face, again, not a fat head or fat face, more of a rounder face, thicker lips, wider, bigger eyes. All of those things, and those are great things. A shorter neck on the kapha body type, not as broad shoulders as the pitta body type. So when we look at these things, they're not bad things. It's one versus the other. Same with the ectomorph. Does an ectomorph have to be, super thin? Not at all, because they may not be in that catabolic state that an ectomorph can trend towards, just like a kapha body type can trend towards being overweight. Yes, but that doesn't mean that either one of those has to be in that state. So again, it's all about balance. So now let me get into the 4 most important types of exercise that you need all of these in your life. So remember, each one of us most likely is going to be a little heavy in one of these, right? A little heavy, maybe in the first one. Let's just go through it. So the first one that Harvard depicts is aerobic-based exercise. All right, so what's aerobic-based exercise? Well, aerobic-based exercise is a thing that probably most of us, a lot of us at least, think about when we hear about exercise. Like, it's someone going for a run, it's someone going for a jog, it's even going for a brisk walk, it's doing the elliptical, it's the rowing machine, any one of those things that we can maintain, let's say for at least, let's go with 3 to 5 minutes, all right, of sustained aerobic-based activity, meaning that you're not in the anaerobic state, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, one thing I do want to just kind of dispel is this myth of only being the anaerobic or aerobic-based state, because when you are training anaerobically, unless it's really like a short set, you're part of your aerobic-based system, which means using your heart and lungs, getting oxygen to the tissues in your body. It's still working, meaning you're still creating energy with oxygen. So that does matter. I think that's important to look at. But one of the reasons why aerobic exercise is so important is that we've seen it now. We've seen it really work incredibly well for the body in terms of health. So I've spoken about this before, why aerobic exercise is making a comeback. This was a couple hundred episodes ago on a Training Thursday. And it was so important to look at because, a lot of times we get heavy on the anaerobic, the weight training. And again, I want to get to that in a moment. But the reason why aerobic training is still important is that you're oxygenating the body. So when people talk about acid and alkaline, well, one thing to look at is not necessarily, the foods that you're eating, whether it be an acid food, such as think of something very acid, such as vinegar, or acid foods that might be more of some of the processed grains. But you also can think of it as oxygenation. So the more alkaline the food, the more oxygen it brings to the body. Well, when you're doing aerobic-based work, let's say you are going for a jog, you're doing the elliptical, you are using an exercise bike, any of those things, you are bringing more oxygen to your tissues. Now, this has been shown that actually does, as long as you don't overdo it, so we'll talk about that. As long as you don't overdo it, it can be tremendous for your cardiovascular system, okay? That means it's going to be great for your heart for longevity, but also it's been shown, and I want to bring this up right now, that it helps with 2 things. It helps with detoxification, so it's removing a lot of waste through sweat and through your lungs if you are sweating. And really great for helping to cut back on cancer, or at least helping cancer-based treatments. I know a lot of people, they've gone through cancer-based treatments, and luckily all of the people close to me are still with me, having gone through cancer-based treatments, and I'm very fortunate that all of those people are still with me. But that's one of the things that both conventional and natural-based medicine says is that we want to do something to oxygenate the tissues, and that's because cancer does thrive in an acid-based environment. So it thrives with sugar-based fermentation and anything lactic acid-based or anything within, let's say, the anaerobic-based realm of energy production. Again, that has to do with fermentation, all right, fermenting. So the nice thing is when you're doing aerobic-based work, well, you're hyper-oxygenating the body. And so it's a great thing. And that's why we always want a place for aerobic-based work. And I got away from that, just like most people. Let's say about a decade ago or so, it was just all about this next thing, and that's strength training. So the second most important exercise is strength training. And this is the anaerobic based for the most part. Again, you're getting some aerobic in there, but really what we're talking about is how the body works using the other system of energy. All right. There are actually 4 subsets of how we work in the body, and that has to do with fast glycolysis, slow glycolysis. I'm not going to get into all of those right now, but it's essentially how much oxygen are you using or how little. And when you're not using oxygen because you're under an acute finite stress, meaning anywhere from let's say 10 seconds to up to 90 seconds, your body starts to use a different energy system. Again, you're still using some oxygen, but what you need to do is create ATP, and you need to create some ATP and energy under an environment where oxygen cannot be utilized fast enough in order to produce energy. So you start to use sugars, and you start to use more of, like I said, a fermentation-based lactic acid environment. And you can start to feel the burning in the muscles. Let's say you're doing a chest press, and your chest muscles start to burn after 10 reps, 12 reps. Well, you know that you're in that anaerobic-based energy system. Okay, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But what happened was this, is that we realized the anaerobic or the strength training and doing circuits and doing supersets and trisets and high intensity interval training, all of those really transform the body better than anything else. So what happened was we started to lose balance in the exercise industry. We started to preach doing all of these high intensity interval training workouts and strength training, and it became 4 days a week, 5 days a week of just doing high intensity interval training, and we just totally disregarded any aerobic based work. And, I say myself was included in this group. I would say 10 years ago, my goal, even more than that now, it's been more than that, but, let's say 15 years ago, I was so focused on anyone that came to me, I needed to make sure that I got them in the best shape possible. And again, I was working oftentimes with, whether it be a celebrity that came from Boston, or I would work with athletes, or I would work with fitness competitors. And so their job was to transform their body, right? And so I could do that. I could do it through nutrition. I could do it through these exercise programs. And I wrote about it. And A Man's Guide to Muscle and Strength really is all of those workouts. And again, it's for women too. But the issue is this, is as I progress in my own thinking, in my own practice, I care about all of those things. I care about helping people look great and feel great, but I also don't want anyone to ever sacrifice years of their life when they could be getting more out of it. Meaning, so I still do the same exact high intensity interval training. I do the same exact strength training workouts because those don't change. The science didn't change. They're still absolutely incredible. But if someone comes to me and says, I want to lead the most balanced, healthy, and I want to try to live the longest that I can, I say, great. I'm going to probably have you do somewhere around 3 resistance workouts per week. And I'm going to have you do somewhere around 2 to 3 cardiovascular-based workouts per week. Or I might have you do 4 smaller strength training workouts. And then at the back end of those, meaning after those workouts, I'll have you do some aerobic-based work, right? So it might be like 20 minutes or so of strength training and then 20 minutes of cardio. And you could do that 3-4 days a week. That would be absolutely fantastic. So I'll give a few more examples of those at the end. And for anyone that's downloaded my welcome package, it's just a sample ideal week. I try to break it down. I try to make things simple for people. And I'll give you that at the end. You can download it if you want. It's right on my website. It just kind of pops up right there at the top at StephenCabral.com, completely free. There's no, obligation. There's actually nothing to buy. It's completely free. So what I want to do, though, is I want to go through this next 2 and then kind of pull it all together for you. So a lot of people know strength training, but if you're not as familiar with it, it's working with dumbbells, or it could be working with your own body weight, although that becomes difficult after a while unless you progress the difficulty of the movement. Meaning that, okay, for example, you can do body weight squats, but once you get to 20 body weight squats, are you going to do 50? Are you going to do 100 body weight squats per set? That's where it starts to get a little confusing for me. And it gets less to be not as much anaerobic and not as much as I'm looking for strength training. I like a little bit of dumbbells in there. I like some kettlebells. I like some bands. And the reason I do like that, besides just your own body weight, is that I also want to work and help people on preventing osteoporosis. And I want to strengthen those bones as well. And the way that you can do that is with some type of impact or a greater load on the body than your current body weight. Let's say you're 30, 40 pounds overweight. Well, your own body weight is actually carrying 40 pounds extra around all the time. And so you might not need any weight at all in the beginning until you start to lose the weight. As you can see from what I'm saying, there is no one for all, but the exercises are always the same. Meaning that you can always do something like cardio, which is your biking, your elliptical. You certainly wouldn't want to run if you're 30, 40 pounds overweight. I know that people tell you that all the time. You need to run because it's going to help you lose weight. Well, that's actually not true, and it's going to hurt your joints more than help you, and I don't want to take you out of the game. So the deal is this. We all need the same movements, right? We need to do the cardio. Let's just say it is biking. We all need to do the exercises, the pushing exercises, the pulling exercises like the chest presses and the rows, and we need to do the squats, the lunges, the deadlifts, the step-ups, right? We need to do all of those. But at the same time, the load might be different for each person. So some people might need heavier weights because they're more of that ectomorph body type, and especially for women as you're aging, that you want to add a little bit of weight in there. And the reason you want to is you want to make sure that the hips and the femur, they take some weight. So you want to do squats with a little bit of weight. And so that will help you to stave off, like I said, osteoporosis, keep that bone strong. Now, I just said, for women as they're aging, men are included in that as well. But here's the deal, and here's what's really important. If you are a parent or you're a coach, try to get your teenage girls, men too, but it's just so much more important for women, to start doing weight training in their teens, because they're going to be able to build up bone mass in their teens and 20s, and then not so much once they get into their 30s, all right? So really, really important. Then you just get to keep it. All right, the third most important exercise, this is the 4 types of exercise, right? The 4 most important types of exercise, because as I said, others fit into that. So if you're talking about Pilates to me, what you're talking about, or kettlebell training, or CrossFit, you're talking about strength training, okay? So that's the strength training, all right? Now, the third most important type is stretching. Stretching, believe it or not, we'll call it a form of exercise. Harvard University considered it a form of exercise. I went back and forth on this. Like, would I consider this a form of exercise? I don't know. But at the same time, it needs to be in there. So I think a proper title maybe for the show is like the 4 ways to train your body to keep it balanced. But that's not really that interesting a topic. But you need this, and here's why. Flexibility, or let's just talk about this. Stretching helps to maintain flexibility. And if you're not flexible enough, well, as you age, you're going to be at increased risk for fall. And if you fall and you haven't been doing your strength training, you could potentially break your hip or leg or arm or whatever, right? So for example, my own mom, this is like 15, 20 years ago, she fell walking my dog and she tore her rotator cuff. And now those are freak things, like an accident, like it just may have just happened, right? No matter what. But if she had strength training, I wonder maybe she would have caught herself. Maybe her body would have been stronger. Who knows? I'm just guessing here, right? I don't know. I've hurt myself as well, and I've done strength training my whole life. But what I'm saying is you give yourself a better chance, right? So the flexibility comes from the stretching and also the mobility-based work, which I'm not going to get too deep into today. I want to leave that for its own show because mobility work is maybe the lost art that hasn't been really talked about as much unless you're going to a really good personal trainer or strength coach or athletic trainer. But there's different types of stretching. Active stretching, dynamic stretching, pretty much the same. Static stretching, ballistic stretching. What we're going to go over today is mainly the static stretching. I've talked about the active before. That's more like before a workout, holding a stretch just for like 3 to 5 seconds so it doesn't slow down the neural pathways. And that means the body's ability to send signals to the muscles to perform an exercise properly. I'm not going to go through all that today because that's probably its own show as well. But the static stretching I'm talking about is after your workout, right? So you do the specific warm-up, check back out. On a previous Training Thursday, I talked about how to warm up properly for your workouts. And it goes through general to specific. You have to check that out. So here's the deal though. After your workout, you should be spending, and I like this statistic. I don't know where it came from, probably no real good science behind it. But if you can do this, you're going to be healthier overall. Take the amount of time that you just worked out. Spend half that time stretching. It seems like a lot, right? We never tend to stretching. Here's the deal though. If we do not keep our muscles lengthened, if we do not keep them supple, this includes the tendons as well, what happens is over time we become more stiff. And also, this is never talked about, is that a more flexible muscle is going to carry more oxygen to it. So if you lengthen the muscle, it's not as calcified, it's not as tight, you're going to allow more oxygen to get to it. You're going to allow it to repair faster. And that's what stretching helps to do. But one of the reasons why I love stretching after a workout is it takes your sympathetic nervous system, right? You were just in like the go, go, go mode. You were trying to kill the weights and go for your personal best and all of those things. Now you get to breathe and you get to relax. And as you relax and as you breathe, you start to calm the nervous system. As you calm the nervous system, you move to the parasympathetic nervous system. As you do that, cortisol levels begin to lower. And as you do that, the opposite hormones, such as testosterone and DHEA, all of those get to rise. They get to help repair the body, switch you more from a catabolic state to an anabolic state. And that is absolutely tremendous for healing the body, but also not allowing you to burn out. So all I recommend is, let's just say you're doing a 40-minute workout and you're like, there's no way I'm saving 20 minutes for stretching. Okay, understood. Can you give me 5 minutes to 10 minutes? That's it. 5 minutes to 10 minutes after your workout. Check out my previous podcast and downloadable PDF for the 5 floor stretches. And that is simply going through a butterfly stretch out those adductors. It's going through a cross-legged stretch. It's going through the one leg over for the hip. It's going through a hamstring stretch. And then it's going through a hip flexor stretch, which gets a little bit like quads in there as well. If you can only do those 5, that would be tremendous. But doing that really, I do agree, totally agree with this little Harvard letter that stretching is the number 3 exercise that everyone needs to have. You know, if you're talking about, oh, my back's always stiff and my hamstrings are always stiff and my neck's always stiff. Well, remember, you're talking about the posterior chain, which is the back of the body. The reason it's so tight is because you most likely sit a lot during the day, right? Or your exercising might be exacerbating that. If you're doing a spin class and you're not stretching your hip flexors, you're not foam rolling or stretching your IT bands, your iliotibial band, which is on the outside of your leg, you might not even know it's tight until you get on a foam roller. You're doing yourself a great disservice because the back is only stiff because the muscles above and below it are pulling on it. For the most part, that's the truth. All right, number 4. I have to get to number 4 because this is not controversial at all. The 4th most important type of exercise is balancing exercises. Okay, first thing that comes to mind is like, yeah, balancing exercises, that's great, but they're easy. Well, not necessarily. But here's why you have to do them. You have to do them for the fall prevention, right? I just talked about my mom many years ago, how she fell when she was walking the dog. Who knows? Again, freak accident could have happened. Into martial arts last week in the UFC, a guy got pulled out of the event simply because he literally tripped over wires backstage when he was, leaving a press conference or whatever. That's an accident. He's totally balanced. He's a supreme athlete. Those types of things happen. So I'm not saying that. But most of us, we slide on ice sometimes. I can't even tell you the number of times walking around Boston in the winter that I've slid on ice or I put my foot outside of the door stepping down and I slid, but I caught myself. Now, am I the most dynamic, gifted athlete in the world? No. But I weight train. I keep my body conditioned. I've always worked on balance exercises. And all of those things allow me, and they will allow you, to keep yourself from falling a lot of the times. Sometimes you will fall. It happens, right? It happens to all of us. But what else is it about balance? Here's the deal. Balance isn't just about fall prevention. It's about training the nervous system. So if you're working on balance, what you're really doing is you're sending, so it's these things called proprioceptors. And proprioceptors are your signals from your nerves telling your brain where your body is in space. So they get sent up the spinal cord. Your brain communicates back down. They tell the muscles how to properly fire. I mean, this isn't even an option. You need to do this because let's say your goal is just you want to get stronger. I take guys and girls all the time and get them away from a heavy back squat when they basically maxed out or heavy deadlift. And I'll have them do one leg squats. I'll have them do some Versaloop band work. I will work on all of these different exercises. I'll have them do a tree pose from yoga. I will have them do, all sorts of rotation-based exercises and essentially trying to get them to stand on one leg, right? Or 3 points if they're in a bird dog-based pose, a quadruped pose. And when I do that, it's telling the brain to work in a different way. Now, not only are you working, again, on that nervous system, but what happens is they call them the smaller muscles, right? The stabilizer muscles get stronger. It is these stabilizer muscles that will allow you to move more weight, and they will allow you to be stronger, especially around the joints, so that we don't hurt our rotator cuffs. Again, I've injured my rotator cuffs before. I've had a knee injury before. I tore my Achilles. A lot of that is just not training smartly way back in the day. And this is, again, who knows this? You don't know this when you're in college unless you've really studied. And I didn't, right? I hadn't studied when I was 17, 18 years old. And even then, I mean, again, into my early 20s, I was still into the bodybuilding thing and lifting really heavy weights and all that, which is a whole different story in itself. But the truth is this, as you train those stabilizer muscles around the joints, you become stronger, your entire body becomes more fit, and it actually shows. So by doing these smaller balance exercises, in the end, it actually transforms your body, it makes you stronger, and it works on fall prevention. So, these 4 things, if they are not balanced in your workout, you are going to become imbalanced. When you become imbalanced, you will get injured, or you won't reach your full potential. That's the bottom line. You're not going to feel your best energy-wise if you're not doing some aerobic-based work, because you're always in the anaerobic-based system doing the strength training. And if you're not doing the balance work, you're more likely to get injured, but you're also not training your nervous system to the highest degree. So even if you're a CrossFit athlete or you're a sports athlete, if you're not training that balance, well, then again, you could be lifting a lot more weight. You could be moving weight. You could be running faster, all of those different things. And then stretching is essentially the icing on the cake. If you do not stretch after your workouts, you are not properly lengthening the muscles. Now, it could just be a ticking time bomb before you get injured, like pull a hamstring or hurt your lower back or just not feel as energetic. Stretching, believe it or not, will give you more energy. Why? Because you're calming the central nervous system. Why? Because you're bringing more oxygen to the muscles. Why? Because you are allowing waste to move out of those muscles and detoxify your body to a greater degree. And yes, every cell of your body needs to detoxify, and that includes your muscles, especially after working out. That's why massage, foam rolling, stretching, sauna, all of those things are tremendous for your body. So hopefully today's episode was helpful. I really do enjoy talking about exercise. It's something that I've been doing now for about 20 years. It will always be a part of my life, but I'm trying to train smarter now. I'm trying to train smarter, which means this, is that I want to be doing this into my 80s and maybe even 90s or more. Who knows? Like, so much is going to happen till when I get to my 90s that we could be living well past 100. I'll talk about that on a future show. I just think that right now, you keep your body healthy. If you can buy yourself another 20 years, just a little bit more than 20 years, the technology, the advances that we're going to have are going to be tremendous. And I believe that if you're keeping yourself healthy now, you're going to be able to enjoy all of those future things to come. So thank you so much for tuning into today's show. Please let me know how you enjoyed it. Just go to Instagram, go to Stephen Cabral, and I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you, as always, for sharing this show with anyone you believe it could help. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stephencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.